Yeah, I know exactly what you're thinking. SCP-049. What do you want about? Avatar is a children's show, how could you ever reach such a conclusion? And I'll tell you what, although you may be correct that Avatar is for kids, you will simultaneously find that it's a lot darker than your average children's show. I mean, everyone behaves themselves when Aang and the squad pass by, but as soon as they leave, the Fire Nation's gonna be melting flesh like wax candles, baby. And perhaps this is the trait that makes Avatar so enjoyable for all audiences. And as I only recently finished the show, may I compliment its beauty for its ability to make you feel everything from love to deep, burning hatred! Not to mention the ahead of its time worldbuilding that made this video possible. Take that how you will. So, looking at that said world building, with our evidence of crime, torture, genocide and drug addiction, I think I can safely infer that some form of sex trade does in fact exist, backed up by the presence of such things like pregnancy and people like Sokka, who unlike the Avatar, do not have their past lives to use as wanking material. And so, like the Avatar, it's only natural we first visit the water tribes, the poles and the foggy swamps. So, sit back, relax, and observe my new magic trick, which involves pulling literal bullshit out of thin air. Out of all the nations, evidence-wise, I was looking forward to the water tribes the least. After all, the Southerners are barely enough to even have one child without abandonment issues, much less a stable population. The Foggy Swamp tribe, in all likelihood, probably fuck the Catigators. So that left the Northern Water tribes, who on a surface level viewpoint do not look like good candidates. After all, who would wear revealing clothing in a climate that could kill in a matter of minutes? But once I rewatched the show, I just realised how much potential there actually is. It goes as a general rule of thumb that if something is to exist, there has to be factors, directly or indirectly, that permit said thing to exist, and the act of prostitution is no exception. Okay then, you say, what is the Northern Water tribes like? Immediately, the very first feature that is obvious to anyone is that they are mostly inspired by the Inuits, evident in their clothing. But their face paint and boats are actually lended from the Polynesians, not to mention the architecture in the city is wholly from Venice. And it's no secret that their society is highly patriarchal, to the point where it's forbidden by law to teach women waterbending. And that feature neatly leads me on to the very conservative way of life and laws, with tradition heavily dictating how people act and behave, such as arranged marriage. How interesting. But is it suitable to host a sex trade? Unsurprisingly, as I found in my research, lay mad pipe was not on the average Inuit to-do list. Polynesians were more or less the same, and I almost downloaded a virus researching prostitution in Venice, and even after that I found fuck all. And if that wasn't bad enough, arranged marriage and tradition aren't exactly encouraging of the act. But however, an absence of evidence doesn't always mean an evidence of absence. Most would think that the Victorians, with their stingy attitudes towards sex and revealing of ankles, would be against such primal urges. But statistically, 1 in 9 buildings at the time were brothels, with one bloke counted 180 fucking 5 prostitutes on the way home from work. A small number out of the 50,000 others in London. No wonder there were so many children back then, because they came at the rate of a gumball machine, baby. But anyway, back on course. Another thing on our side is that there appears to be a high degree of social disparity in the City of Ice, to the point where it's visible in the very layout of the buildings. And if a monarchy is present, suggesting power comes from blood rather than work, it's very probable that poverty is present and makes no effort to hide it. And you know what that encourages? But with the mega religious laws forbidding the act, we all know that the young men of any society would obediently follow this, not putting their need to scratch Yoda behind the ears above all else, backed up by, well, nothing. However, punishment in all likelihood is harsh for this, so secrecy is key. Street prostitution is out of the picture then, so it'd have to be behind closed doors, so everyday households could be used, but there is a much more interesting solution to this. Keep in mind that some people here are waterbenders, with most buildings probably being created this way, and so a much easier and less risky alternative can be deployed. Remember how Zuko got into the city in the first place, through a cavern and through a network of tunnels that led him towards the heart of the metropolis? Just on an unrelated note, of course. Imagine how much easier that journey would be for a waterbender. And I know most of you are probably convinced by this point, but for that spare few who aren't, let me remind you how the start of the tunnel is located in a very concealing structure, could easily be frozen behind the bender, if the chilling temperature doesn't already do this, and has the perfect back entrance for escape that's out of sight for anyone on the walk. Oh, but the turtle seals could have done it. Nah fam, they are here to watch. And if even that's not detailed enough, I can even speculate the goddamn garments that the escorts use. As it turns out, the city's layout is not the only thing that indicates status, but the clothing itself. Men seem to wear dark blues, while women wear paler, lighter shades along with children, while royalty wears purple. And although this isn't without exceptions, it seems like a general rule of thumb to go on. So, as needing to stay hidden, white would be the next go-to in a logical point of view, and despite the fact it wouldn't be comfortably warm in the caves, it would definitely be warmer than on the outside, save from the wind and the snow, so revealing clothing is possible, but normal garments would be worn over the top when not in the sex tunnels as to blend in and not freeze to death. Whew, was that a wild ride? Who would ever know, or need to know depending on how you look at it, that all this could exist? Still think this is kid-friendly? You really think so? Then boy oh boy, this ride is not finished yet, as we take our next trip to... The Earth Kingdom. The Earth Kingdom. I don't know what it was about this place, but some kind of sixth sense told me that this would be the most likely candidate. And small wonder. With so many episodes set there, doubled by the much better documented inspiration and history within the show, it led to a much more detailed bank of information to infer from, even if the process to find it was draining at times. So, where to start? Not every corner of this great civilization is equal representation on screen, so I will split the section into two parts.
Don't let the cave-in get you down.
The first thing that really distinguishes the Earth Kingdom on the world map is its gargantuan size, and with it, a whole menagerie of unique problems. How do you keep control of such a large area, such as collecting taxes, keeping localised politics and beliefs in line of your own, or communicate with your subjects, all of which quickly and efficiently? And that excludes the existence of mountain ranges, impassable deserts, swamps, or any other kind of challenging terrain. And so, the Earth Kingdom has settled with an equally unique solution, just don't give two shits about anybody. After all, locals understand their problems much better than the central authority ever could, and political cohesion would only cause unnecessary conflict and waste time. So that has led to the creation of a decentralised system of power, split into provinces that rely on each other for things such as resources or protection. The United States is probably the best modern example of this, and still proving to this day that this system works just as effectively as trusting 10-year-old me to cross a busy road all by himself. So how would the average sex worker find their customers over such long distances? Walk 500 miles? The answer is a yes and a no. The most common occurrence of this would probably be localised, with husbands sent off to fight in the war, and with income dwindling and corruption rampant, ordinary women may find themselves having to get income from other practices. And what's the central authority going to do about it? They may not be able to intervene or just don't care. But the ones that do travel via unreliable methods such as cartels or EasyJet would probably be focused around one area in particular, the Sea-Wong Desert. Due to its supreme isolation, even described as in the show,
I'm afraid that desert's impossible to cross.
Sending any troops there would be suicide. So, with towns such as totally not Tatooine filled to the brim with morally questionable bounty hunters who, bearing in mind, probably haven't seen a pair of donkeys in at least a year, work would be plentiful. Perhaps there may even be travelling bands of mobile brothels, which journey across the sand dunes under the cover of night to escape the midday sun, on a mission to service the collective horniness of those inhabiting the desolate wastelands, which in all likelihood probably make Genghis Khan's libido look like that of a neutered kitten.
It's a long, long way to Ba Sing Se, but the girls in the city, they look so pretty.
Ba Sing Se, meaning impenetrable wall in... what? English? Seems to be the only language spoken anywhere. But that's not the point. With so much detail put into this thriving metropolis, it doesn't take much thought into imagining why so many fleeing from the Fire Nation aspire to push through canyon and mountain to meet this place. And believe it or not, these people are actually one of the very things that furthers my point tremendously. First thing that is apparent to anyone is that Ba Sing Se is in the middle of a refugee crisis. With the weak Earth Kingdom defences failing many of their citizens, people have no choice but to flee their homes, and where better than the last stronghold against the onslaught that has successfully stood its ground for 100 years. And when this already impressive place is glorified to a utopia in tall tales around campfires, people are without a doubt going to go there. But what does the council of this great city do with a surplus population? The same as any government ever. Shove them into the lower districts and just forget them away. After all, that's gone well in the past. And while we are currently on the topic of districts, the episode City of Walls and Secrets greatly details this. Summarised by myself, you're welcome. The city is split into separate rings. The lower ring, housing most of the refugees and working class. It's the most populated, probably by far, but also possesses gifted craftsmen and other smaller professions, such as organised crime due to the expected low standard of living. The middle ring is the commercial backbone for Ba Sing Se, controlling a menagerie of shops, restaurants and finance, as well as education in the form of universities. And the upper ring is the humble home of the 1%, sheltering the politicians and keeping them away from the filthy commoners. The Earth King has to one-up the fuckers, however, being royalty, and has its own separate mini-ring, which is inspired by the Beijing Palace found in, you guessed it, Colchester. And from this evidence, we can already infer where an area called a red light district is. For those who haven't extensively researched prostitution, a red light district is a place in an urban setting where many sex-orientated businesses reside, like strip clubs, adult theatres and sex shops. Think De Wallen, Amsterdam. And so, can you guess where the red light district is in Ba Sing Se? And it isn't the upper ring. The politicians are a saucy breed but not that daring. I can't blame you though, I'd think the same. So, the red light district is likely to be located in the lower rings of the city, hosting a large number of potential customers as well as employees, probably deeply rooted in criminal activity and moral manipulation. But these businesses have to jump through a few more hoops to properly adapt to the city, however, and those hoops happen to be under the watchful eye of Long Fen. Long Fen is a man with a very clear view of the perfect Ba Sing Se in his eye, and with his control of the Dai Li, who have jurisdiction not only of free speech and politics, but also financially, something that will impact businesses everywhere. And as the sex trade isn't exactly the squeaky clean subject it is, that puts it in a whole heap of danger. Therefore, street prostitution is likely to be illegal, due to its publicity and disrupting of peace. But brothels and whorehouses are much more likely, not only as a guaranteed more secure moneymaker and relative safety for all parties involved, but could just as easily be used to spy on those visiting. As a general rule in totalitarian governments, loyalty comes with rewards, as shown in China's social credit system, and treason comes with harsh punishment, such as the infamous re-education camps seen in countries both past and present. But how do you keep track of this? How do you know who's to reward and who needs a walloping? Many different solutions for the same problem have risen up over the years, like employing the youth as spies, or integrating technology in life to the point where it's impossible to go about. But Longfen could use the sex workers at brothels to his immediate advantage. And with those in power being predominantly male, and with tongues slipping in the most intimate of circumstances, especially with profit looming over the shoulders of those listening, Longfen would encourage and advertise the residents of his eyes and ears, as they grant him both a firm grasp on the rich and the poor with the power of whores. I'll show myself off the stage now. Ba 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 bum. And just like that, with only a spare few musical notes, we, the audience, are immediately thrown back to the stylized goatees, red, black and gold industrial powerhouse that is the Fire Nation. Naturally, as being the civilization that at one point conquered Zawadador, and being the antagonist to the main cast, the writers have well built their shit out of this vital part of the show. Like, did you know the majority of fauna in the archipelago are reptiles, the class of animals that in real life has proven to be more than adept at colonising volcanic islands everywhere? Stuff like this just proves even further the amount of care that went into this vital part of the show, especially considering how most of the animals were designed by throwing them into a blender in the heart of Reactor 4. And so, with all this information and therefore content, selectively picking apart minute details that could mean anything would be easy peasy, right? Well, no. I had to dive deeper if I was to find what I require, and so, after hours of binge watching on Netflix and fact finding on Wikipedia, I was finally able to reach a conclusion. And we're not going to be focusing on the Sun Warriors either. I know they dress like pimps, but shh, Shh. Shh. Immediately from the offset, it is blatantly obvious where the creators drew their inspiration from for the Fire Nation: Imperial Japan, the short-lived empire of the land of the rising sun, that ended due to a force comparable to the power of 2 suns. For a little oversimplified history, Japan, as faced with competition from European superpowers, rapidly industrialised within a generation, becoming a force to be reckoned with in the early 20th century, committing various atrocities and war crimes, partly influenced by the spread of xenophobia and racism within the country itself. So already we can see some parallels. And this isn't just restricted to politics or culture itself, but this also extends to geography, sharing the plethora of bays that make the Fire Nation the thallocracy it is, as well as a low amount of farmable land. This constricts the majority of the population to the spare few habitable flatlands that are outnumbered by uninviting mountain ranges. But the two things that really set the Fire Nation apart from the others, and will heavily influence our focus, are the following: its industrial revolution and striking gender equality. But why do these two things exist? And why do they influence prostitution here? Why, my naive and simple-minded students, I will enlighten you with knowledge that you did not have to learn. But back to basics. What does industrialise mean? Roughly, industrialisation is the process where via a number of predisposed circumstances and innovations, a nation experiences numerous changes, such as a technological boom as well as, well, pretty much everything, from economy, cultural, to most importantly here, social. The advent of the Industrial Revolution in our world started in Britain, which went from a mostly rural majority to a considerable bulk of the population moving away from the countryside and into the blinding lights of the cities, mainly due to the more attractive jobs and payment involved. And so, when so many with the exact same idea follow suit on their totally original thoughts, overcrowding unsurprisingly and unavoidably happens. See my point on the Earth Kingdom. So in the Fire Nation, when so little of the land was habitable to begin with, these slums and depleted neighbourhoods will be packed to the breaking point brim. And the second factor, gender equality. You may think this is only to avoid that dark and icky side of history that media likes to avoid for the sake of profit and viewers, along with racism or cultural diversity. But as Avatar has proven, it is not afraid to show these sides of its world, even embracing it. Something to be admired about the show, really. Basically, the reason this gender equality is due to firebending not really relying on strength or endurance and more so skill, so men have no upper advantage in this field unlike earth or water, yada yada. Hello Future Me does a much better explanation of this, and as I use a lot of his videos into information and help, it would be criminal to not highlight his channel, no matter how small I may be. His link should be here, or here, or here, I don't fucking know, I'm new to this. So unlike the other nations, this equality extends to both genders, meaning both boys and girls can experience the worst of humanity and suffering on the front lines together. Slay Queen! But this does not mean sunshines and rainbows for all, quite the opposite. Remember that out of all those migrating to the cities, not all of them are firebenders, and so have a much less an upper hand when it comes to jobs and industry. Because who would you rather pick? A band of walk-in furnaces that can defend themselves, as opposed to heat-intolerant, protection-needing employees? A bias would form in the benders' favour, no matter how hard these workers toil at their stations. So, the many men and women would be pushed into the streets for work in the Fuzukar as to support their families, as Kagame and Yujo. Street prostitution would be profitable, but dangerous and unreliable, so the morally depraved elite would seek pleasure in many gyros across the cities, either dedicated for one specific gender or conjoined. That's a lot of words for these specific things, isn't it, Japan? Not to mention the hierarchy I found out about researching. Kind of a red light, isn't it? Oh, what have I been doing these past couple months? Right, hope you can still rewatch the series with the same childhood glee and innocence. To give a warning, this won't be my standard kind of video as I want to experiment more considering how new this channel is. But if this does go really well and you want another, I will consider a sequel. If you like this video and subscribe. It would really help out my small but growing channel.